to pay our respects to a dear friend, dear husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, Jerry Green, Gershom Ben Yosef, who today is surrounded by his loved ones and his beloved friends, surrounded by his wife, Charlotte Lola Green, his wife of 64 years, his daughters, Michelle and her husband, Alan Wilner, and their children, Moshe, Asher, Ari, and Yaakov, and by his daughter Shirley, and Zichrono Livracha, her husband Marty Glick, and their children, Michael and Bianca Glick, and Michael and Bianca's children, Margot and Goldie, and Jonathan and Helen Glick, and their daughter Abigail. In just a moment, you're going to be hearing about the life of this wonderful person, but we're going to begin our ceremony, our service today, with first of all a kapitel Tehillim, a paragraph of the Psalms, and then we're going to ask the Chazan Tibor Kovari to also sing a song in Yiddish.
darin lebt sein Leben bis auf finster Nacht, sein Streben als vermiss vermacht. Verloisen, weiß mit Sonn ihm kein Freund, ein Hoffnung, oder sie Fernheit. Wie soll ich gehen? Wer kann entfernen mich? Wie aus Wien soll ich gehen? Als verschlossen jeder Tür. Sie ist die Welt groß genug, nur vor mir riesig und klein. Wie ein Blick muss zurück, sich zerstört jeder Blick. Wie hab ich so
The greatest tribute to a person comes from his children and grandchildren. We're going to ask for our first speaker, Jerry's daughter, Michelle Green-Wilner, to speak, and then we'll hear from his grandson, Dr. Michael Glick, Shirley's son, and then we're going to ask Michelle and Alan's sons, Moshe, Asher, and Yaakov, to come and speak for us. Michelle.
My name is Jerry Green. My given name is Gershon Green. My Polish name was Genek Green. And when I came to Canada, they called me Jerry. Thus began my father's journey as a Holocaust survivor, a husband, a grandfather, and a great-grandfather. My dad loved Fred Astaire and swing music, and boy could he move on the dance floor, especially when he was accompanying his elegant companion, dearest Mom. He would listen to jazz constantly in the car, and speaking about cars, he loved vintage cars. He loved his own cars. He took great pride in everything he worked so hard for. He loved the Yiddish language, and I grew up with phrases such as, "You're draying mein Kopf." And thank you to the cantor for singing so beautifully that Yiddish folk song. As for my father's optimism, the cup was always half full. You could sum it up clearly with a quote from Rav Avram Heschel. Our goal should be to live life in radical amazement, to get up in the morning and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted. Everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. Dad had a fresh, alert humor. He was the master of the one-line kibitz, which my son Moshe is so good at now. In the hospital, he would lift my spirits and everyone around him, including the workers, asking that perhaps the IV should be better served if it was filled with a shot of schnapps, or in the recovery at St. John's Stroke Center, where he met Sister Barrow, who was one of the nuns from St. John's. And she came and brought a very tall palm frond for Easter. And as she was presenting it to my father, my dad proudly declared in full voice, "I'm Jewish!" Dad was my #1 cheerleader. On our calls and almost daily FaceTimes, he would always ask what I was working on. He even surprised me by coming to my first concert at Columbia University. You understood the creative spirit, Dad, being the manufacturer and designer at Green Brothers Furs, alongside his beloved brother, Henry Zichrono Livracha. They designed beautiful coats and even the cloaks for the Supreme Court of Canada. Last week, I came in to celebrate my dad's 89th birthday. I didn't think it would lead me to this day, but yesterday, when we had a full family with all the grandchildren surrounding him, Dad became fully alert and said, "Everything's going to be all right. You can all go home now." Dad, you were a marvelous father, an incredible grandfather. You were generous in love and deeds. In support of Alan and our kids, Moshe, Asher, Ari, and Yaakov, and now Meira, his generosity was really unmatched. You believed in an apple a day. I'm gonna try and do it. You were a muscle guy. You were an avid JCC goer in the gym and on the racquetball court. We could all learn from his expert discipline, which even your doctors commented on. You were brimming with confidence, and your social skills. You taught me to always speak to strangers in a nice way, open a conversation with ease. You had an incredible social attitude, from playing poker with his friends religiously, and when my father had colon cancer surgery a number of years ago, a friend showed up in the hospital who I had never met before, Andy Chow. And I asked, "Who is this person that came to visit my father?" And he explained, "Your father, my parents, owned a restaurant downstairs in one of your father's buildings, and he always treated my parents with such great respect that I now had to pay it forward." We were lucky to have you, Dad, for 89 years. And Baruch Hashem, your departure was swift and sweet, and we will miss you deeply beyond these words.
Growing up with Zeta Jerry, it felt special when we spent time with him. I did not get the impression other kids had Zetas like mine. He was a cool young Zeta who drove fast in his Cadillac coupe, smoked cigars, and would have us taste his beer and schnapps when we were way too young. Even though he hasn't smoked in about 20 years or so, every time I smell cigar smoke, I get this very, very vivid and cozy memory of being with him. He was fun, gregarious, and almost aggressively loving. He loved that he got to meet his great-grandchildren, and he just lit up every time we showed him the new babies. And that's how I will remember him, and that's how I remembered him for every day for the full 35 years of my life. So
one of the earliest memories of my grandfather was at Jonathan's bar mitzvah. I wasn't able to put on a bow tie. I was 3 or 4 years old, and I have all these women that Zeta's coordinating. You remember this? Zeta's coordinating, putting on a bow tie. And I just remember like he was talking with them and making them laugh and just being, meeting everyone. And all I could think of was 2 things. I said, how does Zeta know everyone in this room? And what are the odds that everyone in the room is named Susie? So it was a good idea. He was bad at names, but good with that. So one of the most meaningful conversations I've ever had in my life. Everyone knows that Zeta was a special person. He was a Holocaust survivor, and he let me interview him 7 years ago. And I'm not going to go through everything, but there are three different things. And I think about this conversation a lot. I've listened to it over multiple times again. 3 things. I asked him if he has any advice for us. He said, work hard and look after your family. If you do that, everything will be okay. And that's why I think you meant yesterday. I asked him, what do you think anti-Semitism is? He went through the Holocaust. What is anti-Semitism? He says, this is how he responded. He says, a Jew is someone who works hard and builds himself and other people up. Anti-Semites are the opposite. They knock people down. That's what he defined a Jew as, someone who builds someone up, himself and other people. And the third question I asked him, and I think about this almost every day because of who I am, but also the environment that I'm in. And throughout the whole interview, he did not cry. We were talking about death, horrors of the Holocaust. He cried at this one thing. I asked him, did you ever hide your Judaism after the war? Okay? He said, why should I hide it? And then he says a story. He says, so he was born in Czestochowa, and if you look up, this is a very important city in Catholicism. They have this famous painting there. So his dad arranged, right before they were in the ghettos, right before they were about to go to a concentration camp, his dad arranged with the high priests to send him away, him and his brothers, and they were going to grow up in a Catholic home, and they were going to be Catholic. He did all the paperwork, everything happened. The priest came to the house, and his mother asked him, what are you doing here? They explained, and his mother looked at the boys, looked at the priests, and says, they were born Jews, they're going to go die as Jews. Sent them away. And Zeta lost it at that point. That was the only thing. And I think about that a lot. He was a very proud person. He was a very proud Jew. And I learned a lot about what it means to be a proud Jew and to be a builder. Because what he is. He died a Jew.
There's a parable told about a man who walks around carrying 2 pieces of paper in his pockets. In one pocket, the paper reads, Anochi afar va'efer, I am like the dust of the earth. In the other pocket, the paper reads, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, the world was created just for me. When I think about Zeta, alav shalom, this dichotomy really strikes me deeply. Zeta is my one grandparent who was a Holocaust survivor. And whenever I was learning about the Holocaust growing up, my mental image was always with Zeta in it. It's so incredibly unfortunate that from such an early age, it was ingrained in him this notion of Anochi Afar Va'efer. Life is fragile and not to be taken for granted. But it was out of this feeling that emerged the Zeta that I knew and loved. The Zeta I knew grabbed life by the lapels of its fur coat, and he said, Bishvili nivra ha'olam. I have an opportunity to live life, and I will live it to my best. My Zeta loved living life. And he was such a legend. To know Zeta was to know someone who was constantly joking and laughing at his own jokes. Even in these last few years, even just a couple weeks ago, Miro and I were here visiting, and these conversations were getting slower with Zeta, and Zeta's speaking became fewer and farther between. Very often, the words that Zeta chose to make an effort to say was a joke. For me personally, something ingrained in me from Zeta, because he taught me clothes make the man. Zeta loved fine clothing. He would make sure that I understood that the shirt that he was wearing wasn't just a normal cotton shirt, but it was fine Italian cotton. I love seeing him in his monogram jacket. It's the same jacket he was wearing just a few weeks ago. Whenever I would visit Toronto, Zeta would offer me a suit or a coat to take. I was the grandson who was short and lucky enough to be fitting in his size. Zeta taught me that dressing well and with style means living with a sense of dignity, but also enjoying life for all that it has to offer. Zeta also taught me how to hang my suit pants so that there wasn't a crease in the middle. He would admonish me if I wasn't taking care of my clothing. And he would often remark that this suit is custom from Paris and over 40 years old. And it still looked brand new. He never forgot, in the end, Anochi Afar Va'efer, life never to be taken for granted. Meir and I were so lucky this past summer. That Zeta was able to make it to the wedding. I'm so glad that Meir got some time with him for our 2 trips here. Meir instantly loved Zeta. When Zeta came to the wedding, he showed up. He could barely stand for 5 minutes. But he was wearing his signature sunglasses and his pristine tuxedo. And even as the groom, I couldn't outdo him. To close, I want to share my favorite saying that Zeta had. Very often we would turn to Zeta and say, where are you going? What are you doing? And without skipping a beat, he'd answer, who, me? I'm going dancing. Zeta, you dance through life. Bishvili nivra ha'olam. I'll keep trying to dress like you and living with the sense of dignity that you exuded. And let us all dance just as sweetly as you did. I love you, Yitzhak Robo.
In the weekly Torah portion, so recently we just finished Sefer Bereshit, which is the first book of the Torah, and the last parsha which we just read is Parshas Vayechi, and the parsha begins by telling the story of the death of Yaakov Avinu, the death of Jacob, and it says Vayechi Yaakov, that Yaakov lived, and it says the number of years that he lived, and based on that, the Talmud tells us that Yaakov Avinu lo meis, Yaakov Avinu never died. And the Gemara asks in Tanis, how is that possible? They buried him, they eulogized him. How is that possible that he never died? And then the Talmud says, Mazaro b'chaim, apu b'chaim. That just like his descendants are still alive, so too he's still alive. So if we take the legacy, we take that which he gave us, then he remains alive. So what can we take? What can we take from Zeta to keep him alive? And I think what's been touched on is Zeta's smile, right? Zeta lighting up a room, walking into a restaurant, walking into anywhere, and going up to every single baby and treating them like they were his own. And being able to carry that unbelievable amount of simcha. When I was, I think, 7 years old, I came downstairs and Zeta was having a yellow colored drink, and he tells me, "It's apple juice, try it, try it." Little did I know that was, he was having a cup of whiskey in the morning, as one does, and immediately coughed it back up, because who else had a Zeta that would play practical jokes on somebody? His 7-year-old grandson. It's been touched on that his smile came even though, despite, because of the darkness that he went through as a young child, as a survivor of the Holocaust. And I remember very vividly being told that story many, many times of the priest in the ghetto. But I remember one time I was sitting outside on the couch with Zeta in LA. We weren't talking about anything in particular. And he turned to me and he said, "I believe in the Rabbanu Shalom." The Rabbanu Shalom, right? I believe in God. I don't understand why he took away my childhood, but I believe in God. And I don't think I'll ever be able to get to that level of emunah. But that's the fierce pride in being Jewish that Zeta had. Zeta will try to keep that simcha, keep that and Mazar b'chai, Afu b'chai, keep you alive.
A few years ago, Michelle and Alan's son Moshe went on a trip with his yeshiva to see the camps in Poland. And after that experience, Abba and Ima sent a letter to Moshe to just give some context about Ima's family, Ima's father. I'm just going to read you a small portion of that so that you get a better picture of who Jerry Gershon ben Yosef was. And they write, "I would now like to tell you Zeta's story. In our house in the den on the small table, we are so lucky to have a picture of Zeta when he was a baby in his mother's arms with all his siblings around him at a picnic in the park. How did this picture survive?" I asked Zeta. Zeta's father's parents were great Zionists. Before the war, they decided they would immigrate to Palestine. They left Zeta's father their factory to run, a clothing manufacturing business, and that is why Zeta's immediate family did not leave Poland. However, we are lucky because Zeta's father wanted his parents to appreciate his family. He sent them in Palestine pictures of the family before the war. So it is for this reason that we have a few surviving pictures of Zeta's life before the Holocaust. Once the Goldstein grandparents were sent to Auschwitz, Zeta tells that the rest of the Jews in Czestochowa were placed in the ghetto. They lived in this ghetto for about 4 years, the whole immediate family together. Zeta remembers at the age of 6 being placed in the ammunition factory and with a cart in his hands being told to pick up all the rejected bullets from the floor. That was his job. There is a scene in Schindler's List that reminds me about it. At the end of their time in the ghetto, things got worse. Zeta's mother and sisters were taken and sent to Auschwitz. They thought that they would never see each other again. Zeta and his brothers, Henry and Dave, were transferred to Gross-Rosen, a concentration camp arms factory in Germany. Zeta mentioned that here they did nothing. They had all the Jews wait and wait. They made them take showers and then run through the snow in the nude. Zeta says they were so cold they used paper to make themselves socks. Zeta thinks they stayed there for 6 months. Following Gross-Rosen, they were transferred to Dora, also in Germany. Here they were placed in a barrack near the crematorium. Thankfully, they were all together. Zeta's father was an excellent tailor, so luckily he was placed to fix the Gestapo uniforms. He was also very smart, giving his sons jobs of knitting the holes in the Gestapo soldiers' socks so that they would also be seen as necessary. When they would leave the barracks, they would have to walk over all the dead bodies that were waiting to be placed in the crematoria. Only now has Zeta been able to tell me about this. Zeta said, "It's hard to remember these things, you want to forget about them." Zeta was one of the youngest in that terrible place. At the age of 9, Zeta was transferred with his family to Bergen-Belsen. Here too they waited, doing nothing. He says they were treated like dogs. They ate whatever they could get their hands on. Since Zeta was such a skinny kid, at age 9, they had him slip through the iron gate at night and snatch potato peels, which they would cook secretly in water. The British thankfully liberated Zeta, his father and 2 brothers, from Bergen-Belsen. After the war, the British soldiers gave everyone canned meat. Being the smart man that he was, Zeta's father wouldn't allow his kids to eat it. He traded the cans for bread. He knew that their stomachs weren't ready for meat. It is chronicled that many Jewish children perished after the war because of this. Zeta and the family moved to Celle in Germany. Just a 30-minute drive from Bergen-Belsen, this town had the only remaining shul in the area. You can see pictures of the shul on the internet. It is in this town that Zeta saw Disney's castle. This too is available to see on the internet. Zeta's father became the vice president of the shul. Slowly they received relief money, rented an apartment, and were known as the Green Boys. After 6 months, a miracle occurred. Zeta was at home, his brother's out at work. There was a knock on the door. He opened it to find his mother, a skinny little woman standing before him. I asked if he remembered what they said to each other. He said there were no words. She gobbled him up with kisses and hugs. I'm writing to you now, Michelle writes, as your mother, crying about this now. I can't imagine not being able to see you for so long, not to know of your whereabouts, not to know how you are. Listening to Zeta describe it again just today, hearing him break down in tears, I can only try to imagine his joy at seeing his mother again. He would soon also see his 2 sisters, for they survived as well, but were hospitalized after the war, so they came later. And now Zeta recounts his life finally began. The town got a shoichet. His mother was a great balabusta, and so he finally began to eat. After 3.5 years, they immigrated to Canada. Zeta's mother already had family in Toronto. Her brother had already started a fur business. Uncle Henry worked there. Finally, Zeta went to school. He was placed in a class that ran with kids from grades 1 to 4. He didn't know a word of English. His father became president of the Arbiter Ring Shul. His mother, he remembers, would invite many rabbis to the Pesach Seder. Their house on Palmerston Boulevard was packed with so many people all the time, and the entire family lived together with their wives and husbands and all their kids. Zeta got a job sweeping the floors in a fur business and started to learn the business from the bottom up. One day, Uncle Henry called and asked if he wanted to go into business together. Zeta decided that selling high-end furs was the only way to go. Green Brothers started. Zeta was already married and only 25 years old. At the Canadian Expo of 1967, Zeta was awarded 6 times for his designs. Upon telling Zeta about your upcoming trip, he had these words to say. Moshe, you had such a wonderful start to your life. You are so incredibly lucky to have such a strong family. You must continue from where you came. You must hang on to our precious heritage because it is so very important to me. I didn't even have a chance to go to school in Poland and Germany, and when I did go in Canada, I was bullied constantly for my Judaism and for being a blue boy or a grena, a foreigner. I want you to be a leader and be strong and proud about where you come from. And then Mom and Dad, Abba and Ima, give their love and salutations to Moshe. I can only reflect on the fact that today, Jerry is once again being reunited with his mother and his father, and his mother is embracing him with her skinny arms, having her boychik back together again. May the family be comforted. May God wipe away the tears from all faces. Before we recite the Keil Mole, just an announcement about the cemetery service and the Shiva. The burial will take place right after our service today at Pardes Shalom Cemetery, Beth Tikva Synagogue section. It's on Dufferin Street in Maple. As far as Shiva, the family will be sitting Shiva in the Green Home at 1 Clark Avenue. UPH is the apartment number 1 in Thornhill. Today, everyone is welcome to visit from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. On Tuesday to Thursday from 2 p.m. to 5 and from 7 to 9 p.m. On Friday from 1 to 3 p.m. and on Saturday from 7 to 9 p.m. after Shabbos. We ask if men are able to attend. There will be a Mincha Ma'ariv service on Tuesday through Thursday at 5 p.m. and Shiva concludes Saturday evening, January 25th. If we can ask everyone to please rise for the Kiyom Mole.
Gershon ben Yosef.
שאנחנו מתפללים ביד הסתרת נשמתו בגן עדן מנחתו לכן ברחמים נסתירנו ושאת כנפיו לעולמים מצדו ייצור החיים את נשמתו אדוני הוא נחלתו יענוח ושלום על משכבו
Pallbearers, please come forward.
All those right here to my left, please. Okay, gentlemen. We ask the family to go back to the family room this time. Does anybody need direction to Pradesh Shalom? Everybody knows where the cemetery is? Okay, good. If your car is in the parking lot, please exit the door and follow.